and welcome back to another video essay about Neuvillette. I can't believe that this is the third video. Hopefully it is the last, but we'll see if I have more to say after Fontaine ends. Anyway, I'm doing this without my chat today, so I'm super nervous. There probably will be some flubs. Apologies in advance. Anyway, I finally did Neuvillette's character story quest, and if you couldn't guess, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I made some predictions about what was to come last time, and today I want to talk about what I got wrong, what I got right, major themes that were explored in the quest, and why I think it's one of the best, if not the best, character story quests we've gotten thus far. Warning that there will be spoilers ahead, so you should go do the story quest and experience it for yourself first. I really think that it's something that is great to go in blind. In my last video, I made a few predictions about Neuvillette's story and how 4.1 would pan out. Let's start with what I got wrong. I predicted that his story quest would feature an internal struggle over the meaning of justice. I'm hesitant to say that's completely off the table for the future of his character, but there was certainly no such struggle during this quest. Neuvillette's sense of justice is unyielding and infallible. In fact, that is a key point of the story. Still, with his sense of justice being brought into question so many times now through the trailers, I feel like this could still be explored later. We'll have to see how Act 5 of the Archon quest goes. I also predicted that there would be a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. I think I was half correct. While he does discover something new about himself and the world around him, he does not seem to struggle much with who he is internally. Instead, the events seem to unfold the way they do because of a fundamental misconception of who he is and how society sees him. I was pretty pleased to see that my prediction about this coming up as a plot point was correct, but he neither holds himself above others nor does he undervalue himself. Instead, he simply holds himself apart. I also suggested that he works so hard to fit in, but it seems he believes his duties to be a core part of his identity. Rather than living up to others' expectations, he's actually working hard to live up to his own responsibilities. Seriously, my ideal man. As for my last prediction, which was that a personal storyline for him might be about a yearning to fit in, yet feeling like he can't because of what he is, I'm happy to say that I was pretty much on the mark with that. I was originally very hesitant to propose that idea because it might have just been a personal bias towards those stories that made me hope, but I'm so glad that they really went that route. It's one of my favorite themes to explore in character stories. To discuss this and other major themes of the stories, I will approach them as they are presented, gradually going through the unfolding events. I won't discuss everything in order, and I won't discuss everything that happens in the story because I don't want this to be a summary, so I'll focus on just relevant moments. Let's begin with the catalyzing incident and explore Neuvillette's personal motivations. Last chance to back out if you want to avoid spoilers. Please play the quest and experience it first, then come back and let me know what you think. When we meet with Neuvillette, we are informed that he has decided to personally investigate a threat made against a Melusine called Chiara. He insists that a larger conspiracy against him may be at play and seems very concerned that the Melusine is being used to target him. He claims this case bears a lot of resemblance to a case that took place 400 years ago, in which another Melusine close to him was targeted in order to bring him down. The case resulted in her giving up her own life. Neuvillette insists that his position as an outsider makes it difficult for him to rely on other Fontainians to help him with this case, so he must investigate it himself. As fellow outsiders, we as travelers get to follow along. But while we know Neuvillette to be a generally objective and impartial judge, there are early hints that things may not be as he presents them. Paimon points out how strange it is that he considers himself an outsider in Fontaine when he's the nation's chief justice. But there's also the matter of the case itself. Neuvillette insists on handling this case because it reminds him of the case from 400 years ago, but the only similarity seems to be that a Melusine is involved. This ultimately ends up being a subversion of our expectations, as it turns out that Neuvillette had overreacted and there was never any conspiracy against him or the Melusines. During the investigation, we go to the Fountain of Lucine to investigate the memories and emotions in the water so that we can track down those who may harbor resentment towards Neuvillette. We accidentally tap into various memories related to Neuvillette and see him meeting with the Melusine from the case 400 years ago, Carol. We see how she's struggling with being accepted by human society, having rocks and insults lobbed at her even after she's joined the Maréchal Phantom. We see the conspiracy unfold and we are confronted with Neuvillette's fears. The main issue that Neuvillette is dealing with in the story is his sense of belonging. It was mentioned in his strip marketing that he has a deep connection to the Melusines, that he may in fact be a Melusine himself. Obviously, we know that's not to be the case, but looking back, it seems like it was a hint of what was to come. The Melusines are now very firmly established as an extension of Neuvillette. Their struggles are his, their fates tied to his, which is why they were targeted in the first place. He and the Melusines both began as outsiders to Fontaine, and perhaps the reason he's so desperate to protect the Melusines is because he's protecting his own place. I'm not saying that he's being self-serving. It's just very clear that he sees a threat to the Melusines as a threat upon himself, because that's how it was 400 years ago. He clearly cares about them and doesn't want them to get caught in the crossfire between him and his enemies. So he ends up being very protective of them and overreacting like a dad. But when we are on our way to the next location, we see the people in Fontaine have become aware of this threat to a Melusine via the rumor mill, and everyone is eager to catch the culprit and protect all Melusines. There are those volunteering to patrol and walk with them, others calling out for the villain to come out and fight them instead, many expressing concern for the Melusines as co-workers, friends, and important members of Fontainian society. Neuvillette sees this change and he seems relieved that things are so different now. At least one of his fears is assuaged. I think it was crucial that we witness how things played out for ourselves so we could feel the weight of Neuvillette's history in Fontaine. This was crucial to setting up another key theme in the story quest: memories and what it means to hold on to them. Experiencing them like this, we see that these events remain fresh on Neuvillette's mind, painful as they may be. While it is important to recognize what has happened in the past, the story makes a case that holding on to the past can make it hard to move on, and seeing how much the world has changed around you. Neuvillette is so fixated on this case from 400 years ago that he can only imagine the worst. Moving on, with some help from the Spina de Rosella, Neuvillette is able to track down the one who sent the letter. I loved how many other major characters appeared in the story, and not just for no reason. In fact, they all served another major theme in the story. While Neuvillette is convinced at the beginning that he cannot rely on anyone in Fontaine due to their various political interests and his own personal position as an outsider, he misses how many people are willing to lend a helping hand to one of their own, in this case the Melusines. Every member of every faction has sided with the Melusines. Even before the scene described earlier, Sedan insists the guards can handle this investigation. Clorinde herself takes on the task of guarding Chiara, expressing her dissatisfaction with leaving the job to Neuvillette. Navia and her organization are of course the ones to locate the first major lead. Among the citizens, there is a reporter from the Steambird, other than Charlotte, and members of the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol who all stand up for the Melusines. Chiara herself seems very aware of this. She's not worried that anyone would hurt her, saying that she's confident of her safety because everyone would be looking out for her. The story makes the point that it's important to trust and rely on those around us. When the culprit has been captured and Neuvillette has finished interrogating him, it's revealed that there never was any conspiracy. It's Risley who finally tells Neuvillette directly that things are different now than 400 years ago, and he may be overthinking it. He also reveals to Neuvillette something he missed all those years ago. Aside from Carol's death, Neuvillette lost another close friend during the case 400 years ago, Vautrin, a member of the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol. He chose vigilante justice and executed all those involved in the original conspiracy against Neuvillette and the Melusines. Of course, he was sentenced to exile in the fortress of Meripede. Putting on an act at his trial, he showed resentment towards Neuvillette in order to further display the Eudex's unimpeachable sense of justice and sway those on the fence over to his side. Having realized how he misunderstood him all those years ago, Neuvillette expresses his gratitude to Risley for enlightening him. This final reveal allows Neuvillette to move on from his guilt over what happened to Carol and Vautrin. He can now accept that change had been set in motion all those years ago. The quest draws to a close, with Neuvillette finally coming to accept himself as a citizen of Fontaine. Risley affirms Neuvillette's place by saying that Neuvillette's every judgment has had an effect on Fontaine. When asked what they think, the Traveler says that every case Neuvillette has overseen has also left its mark on him. Perhaps the line between him and humans was blurred long ago. As if making a step towards changing himself, he surprises everyone by accepting Charlotte's interview request. It's a gesture that speaks to how he wishes to communicate better with the citizens of Fontaine. It's fitting that the quest ends with a note from Farina on his desk. He had suggested at the start of the quest that she would take no interest in where he went off to, but she wrote to him a response to his request, expressing her desire for him to get out and see the world outside of the Palais Marmonia. What he needed all along was to be with the people, not to observe them. Neuvillette's quest reminds us at the very end that it's up to us to go out and discover the truth of the world for ourselves. In fact, this is a major theme for the entire game. I think this quest was the best executed so far, and I just want to spend a little time gushing over it. First, it didn't suffer any problems with pacing or drag. I think that's because we were always on the move with Neuvillette and interacting with interesting characters who all served a purpose. Nearly all of the Fontainian main cast was involved, even Farina in her letter at the end, and no one's role was wasted either. There were also no fetch missions, so we were able to be fully immersed in the story and the mystery of figuring out what had happened all those years ago. I think something that helped maintain player engagement was that many themes, symbols, and hints were brought up early on. As I mentioned, Neuvillette's connection to the Melusines is mentioned as far back as his strip marketing, so it was always something on our minds. Hints are dropped from Sedan's first lines of the dialogue that Neuvillette is overreacting, and these hints make the plot and themes of the story easier for us to grasp as we progress through the story. While I'm sure that many players were actually able to figure out what was going on before Neuvillette, no one was bored, and that's because the story still had some surprises and twists sprinkled together. One part of the story I really enjoyed watching other players play through was the investigation of the Mutual Aid Network. That's because nearly everyone assumed they were a racist organization, even after reading their code. The story deliberately leads us to suspect them, especially given how Genshin stories usually play out. We expect a big conspiracy, another hand at play. It becomes a surprise reveal when we see that the Mutual Aid Network is truly as it says it is. We also got to see a different side of Neuvillette. Aside from his past memories, we get to see him grasp with difficult questions about his identity and his place in the world. We get to see him make mistakes, and we get to see him change right in front of us. Was there anyone who wasn't moved by his smile at the end? One problem people have often cited in the past about character story quests is there's no character growth. Sometimes there's not enough insight. But by going through this emotional journey with Neuvillette, it's hard to say that the story won't leave you with an impression. Another common complaint is that these quests focus too much on NPCs. While I think the NPC stories do often represent character traits or ideas that are relevant to the nominal character, I understand that new NPCs being introduced can make it hard to care about them right away or to see their connection to the character that we're playing for. There have been a handful of quests that have focused more on the playable characters recently, but probably still not enough. This time, I do want to note that the NPCs at the center of the story have a direct connection to Neuvillette. We hear about Carol and Vautrin first from Neuvillette, so we can see their significance to him. The Melusines share the same story as Neuvillette. We also don't waste time on villains except as the plot device. And collectively, all the NPC citizens showed us the attitude towards Neuvillette in the past and the present and gave us more insight into him without directly telling us. I hope going forward we get more quests like this. It looks like Hoyoverse is showing us that time will inevitably lead to change. Anyway, I'm not good at outros, so I'll end this video with one thing that I didn't get to talk about during the rest of my exploration of themes. And that's because this seems more like a speculative plot point. Ever since Act 1, we've been curious about who Neuvillette is, and it seems he's also struggling to figure out his own purpose in life. We first wondered what he was. Now we know he's a dragon, but we don't know what he's going to do, what his role in the story is. During the quest, Paimon asks Neuvillette why he as a dragon would want to live among humans, and he answers he's trying to figure out the purpose of his existence. Carol shares the same reason for wanting to leave her village. The reason I didn't want to discuss this earlier is because the answer remains unclear to me, even by the end of the character's story quest. If Carol, as an extension of Neuvillette as a Melusine, then does that mean that he will have to make a sacrifice? However, 400 years, a lot has changed. Obviously, he's no longer an outsider. Does that mean, though, that his only purpose is to continue to act as the Chief Justice of Fontaine? I really hope Act 5 gives us answers to these questions. What are your predictions?